subtraction problem, I have 204 minus 89. So I am doing 3 different strategies for 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. So for the 2nd grade strategy, I will be doing the base 10 manipulatives based on the standard NC.2.NBT.5, which states that students will be able to demonstrate fluency with addition and subtraction within 100 by flexibly using strategies based on place value, properties of operations, and or the relationship between addition and subtraction. For the 3rd grade strategy, I'm doing expanded form, which is based on the standard NC.3.NBT.2, which states that students will be able to add and subtract whole numbers based up to and including 1,000 using the expanded form to decompose numbers and then find their sums or differences. For 4th grade, the standard I chose is the standard algorithm based on the standard NC.4.NBT.4, which is when they will add and subtract multi-digit whole numbers up to and including 100,000 using the standard algorithm with place value understanding. So, elementary students solve subtraction problems in multiple ways depending on their grade level. Today I will show you 3 of these strategies for solving the problem 204 minus 89. The first strategy will be for 2nd grade. 2nd grade students use base 10 manipulatives to solve subtraction problems, and so this is what it might look like. First, the students would take the manipulatives for 204 and lay them out. So there would be 2 flats to represent the 2 100s. And there would be no rods because if you look here, there's a 0 in the tens place. So again, no rods. But if you look in the ones place, there will be 4 bits or 4 ones. Yeah. So since this is a subtraction problem, students do not need to make manipulatives for the 89 as they are taking that out of the 204. Students will start out in the ones, as this is where you begin to solve at any time during a subtraction problem. In this problem, the students only have 4 bits in the 204, but they need to take away the 9. Since the 9 is larger than the 4, a student would realize this and would go into the next grouping of tens to regroup. In the tens place, there are no rods, as we talked about earlier, because when you look at 204, there's no tens. So this would mean that the student would have to then move on to the flats or the hundreds place in order to be able to regroup. So luckily, there are 2 flats. So the student would be able to take 1 flat and change it to and break it down into 10 rods. So this might look something like this. So I'm just moving them over so you can see the division. And the student does know that this 1 flat is proportional to the 10 rods seen here. And so, however, the student would realize that they have not yet taken care of the ones place. So in order to give the rod, the 1 rod to the ones place, in order to start solving the problem, they would have to break this rod into 10 bits, which again they would know equals is proportional. 1 rod is proportional to 10 bits. So now the student has added the 10 bits, as seen here, to the 4 bits that we had originally in the problem. They will have a total of 14, which you can take 9 from 14. So it looks like they are now ready to solve the problem. So when we look at the ones place, the student needs to take 9 bits away from the 14. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So this means that they are left with 5 bits or 5 ones. So next we're going to look over at the tens place, and so we have 9 rods, but we need to take 8 away, as seen here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now we are left with 1 rod, or 1 tens. Finally, the student will move on to the hundreds place, where they will find no hundreds needing to be taken away from the 1 flat that is already there. Therefore, that would be equal to 1 flat, or 100. So the students would put the remaining manipulatives together to get the answer of 115. So moving on to the second strategy, which is for 3rd grade. The students are going to be using expanded form to solve the subtraction problems. So first, the student would have to write out the subtraction problem 204 minus 89, and they would do so probably on top and bottom. So the 204 would go on the top, since this is the larger number, and the student would have to make sure that they are matching up the tens and the ones with each other. So the 8 would match up with the 0 as they are in the tens place, and the 4 would match up with the 9 as they are in the ones place. So the student would probably start to notice that they cannot take away the 9 from the 4. Again, due to this, they would probably begin to expand the two numbers. So the 200 would turn into 200 plus 0, since there's that 0 again, and plus 4. Again, the 2 over here is the same thing as 200. It's just written differently in expanded form. And then there's nothing in the 10 space, and then the 4 is represented as just the 4. But then we look at the 89, they would notice that there isn't a 100 or a hundreds place there, so they might just put 0 to not get confused. And then they would look at the tens place, where they would put their 80, which equals that 8 equals 80. And then going at their ones place, they have the 9, so the 9 would just be by itself as a 1. Since we are subtracting the number 89, or 80 plus 9, the student may want to write the minus signs instead of plus signs, so they don't get confused and start adding. So it might look something like this. Oopsie. Something like this. The student would still have to see that they have the same issue, and they cannot subtract a larger number from the smaller one, so they can't take 9 away from 4. So the student would have to look into the next place, or the tens place, which unfortunately does have that 0, and so they could not regroup using this 0. So in order to regroup, they'd have to look over at the hundreds place, and they would find the 200. So the student would take one of those hundreds, leaving 100, and moving it over to the tens place. So now we have our tens that we're filled in with our tens. We're still good with our hundreds, but again, we're still not good with our ones. So this would mean that the students would have to take one of the tens from that 100 in the tens place. So that would look like that, leaving 90, and then adding the 10 to the 4, making 14. So the student would then see that they can now take away a 9 from 14. So this would be done so. So 14 minus 9 equals 5. Moving to the tens place, 90, up here 90, minus 80 equals 10. And then looking at the hundreds place, 100 minus 0 equals 100. So the student would be left with 100 plus 10 plus 5, which they would solve to make the 115. And then the final strategy would be used for 4th grade. 4th grade students use the standard algorithm to solve subtraction problems. And so the first thing the student would do would be to align the digits of 204 and 89 in the appropriate values like they did in third grade. Again, making sure that they're all in the right spot. There's no hundreds place in 89, so there wouldn't be a number underneath the 2. And so the first thing the student would do would be to look at the ones place. The student would notice that they cannot take away the 9 ones from the 4 ones because they're taught you can't take a larger number from a smaller number. The student would have to regroup in order to subtract from the ones place. This would look like they would look at the tens place where they would again find that 0, which doesn't allow for them to take any numbers away or to be given. Since there are no values, the student would have to look at the hundreds place where they would find the 2. They would rewrite the 200s as a 1 since they are giving that 1 to the tens place. And the student would then regroup it as 10 tens. So we would cross that out and put a 10 up there. But again, that doesn't solve the problem in the ones place that's happening. So they would be looking back at the tens place, the student would see that they can take away one of the tens and be left with 9. So 9. And they can add that 10 they just took away to the 4 in the ones place and have 14. And then this would allow them to begin the subtraction problem. So in the ones place now, 14 ones minus 9 ones is equal to 5 ones. In the tens place, 9 tens minus 8 tens is equal to 1 tens. And then finally in the hundreds place, 1 100 minus 0 100 equals that same 1 100. The student would then be left with the answer of 115. So when looking back at the problem of 204 minus 89, we can see that there are multiple ways to solve the problem. Starting at second grade, students would have the ability to solve the problem using either having virtual or perhaps physical base-10 manipulatives to solve the subtraction problem, where they can actually see how the pieces are being moved around and taken away. In third grade, the students would move up a step where they're no longer having those manipulatives, but they can expand the problem to easily see the hundreds, tens, and ones places and how those are moved around in a problem. And then finally in fourth grade, we can see that the standard algorithm would be used in which the students are beyond the manipulatives and they can solve the problem without they can solve the problem with regrouping throughout the different place values, but they don't have to add like the extra